if there is a purpose for our existence here, what that might be going forward? Because it's clearly not just along the lines of what we're doing now. So for me, it would just be like, just take a step back from the materialistic culture. That's clearly not got a future in terms of energy and environment, for example. We can't carry on like this. So we just try and step back from that and just live a little rather than just be like dying on our feet, as it were. Ask people, if you talk to people, how would you like to spend your day? You talk to people who are in various jobs or whatever. 9 times out of 10, it's not what they're actually doing. And say, okay, well, why is that? It's talking about, well, why are we doing that? But I just think that we funnel ourselves into a trap, and it's a bottomless pit. And I know that's diagnosing the problem again, but for me, this is what the future would involve: stepping back from where we are now as a bit of a kind of a time out. And I'm not exactly sure what the near to medium term future might look like, but I do know that it has to be different from what it is now. I'm trying to, as a way of exploring these possibilities, to live with less but do more, if you see what I mean. And and there's a lot of other people who are trying to do that as well, partly through necessity. But I'd like to be encouraging people who are perhaps being forced into a corner of material circumstances to develop strategies and techniques for, like, okay, well, how can we get to the point where that's actually the dominant trend, if you see what I mean? So that more people are able to say, thank God I don't have to do that anymore, because the systems that we were working to support have been, downstepped to a point where that's possible.
Now, welcome back to Connecting with Coincidence. Glad to have you with us. Have a very interesting gentleman from Great Britain on the show. Greg Moffitt is a guy who has experienced a great many synchronicities, and particularly I got caught up in one of them when I was on his podcast, and he began talking about this complicated one, and it's different from the usual one. I think of something and it shows up. It's an intricate cousin. He has a great podcast himself. I've been fortunate to be his guest. And the last time we spoke, he mentioned this convoluted coincidence, and I wanted to hear more about it. So we have that opportunity, and he's very interested in the future of humanity. So what we're going to be discussing is the synchronicity, yes, but also the role that synchronicity might play in the future of humanity. Greg is an independent writer, editor, and broadcaster based in Yorkshire, England. Active since 1987, he's been published extensively, both at home and abroad. Over 35 years experience in the music industry as both a musician and a journalist. He is co-author of the book Beyond Time and Space, The Art of Paul Raymond Gregory. He currently hosts the Legalize Freedom podcast. So welcome to my show this time, Greg. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Bernard. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
So you began this story when you interviewed me of the romance and intricacy in many years, and that's kind of what I remember about it. So why don't you give us some idea about that intricate coincidence that you began telling me about?
Okay, well, so we're kind of diving into what was sort of the centerpiece of how I envisioned we would do this, and also kind of the most important series of synchronistic experience, I suppose, but I count it as a single kind of event in my life involving personal relationships, romantic relationships, which in my experience of all this, where I am now in my mid-50s, it feels like one experience, so like one relationship with something else, or perhaps with myself, but the manifestation of it was with other human beings, if you see what I mean. And there was a series of events going right back to my early 20s that linked a number of people together in my life, in, in romantic relationships. And I didn't always see it that way. And I've only really I think it started to crystallize around the time, maybe about 10 years ago. And then the first time I really mentioned it was speaking with you, when you were my guest, as I started to tie it all together and say, this is just a chain of causality, um, like, I don't know, particles popping into reality, then back out again because, oh, that's not quite right. We'll try this. How's that? But it's all linked, if you see what I mean. So that all of these events that I'm describing were like the tips of icebergs, if you see what I mean. But beneath the water, it was all interconnected. So to put that in more concrete terms, I'm talking about meeting a person, having a romantic relationship many years ago in my early 20s with someone which I felt that I brought into my life. We can talk about this more later through through desire and will, what's often common called in the parlance manifesting, which I see also as tied into coincidence and serendipity and synchronicity. It's all part of one wider reality, and that then led to this chain of events and people that brings me to where I am now. And the thing that flagged it up for me initially was simple things like people having similar, people looking like other people. I have a relationship with someone who looks like someone I have a relationship with later, or simple things like the same birthday, the same age at the same time, from the same country, with the same hair color, and just things like that. And you could tie it all together literally. Think of like a Venn diagram of these people and where the overlaps are. So that's kind of the headline of what I'm talking about, this chain of events throughout my life to date.
Go ahead.
Okay, so when they talk about people in these sort of contexts, they tend to give them like an initial, don't they? So I, when I was in my early 20s, not unusual for a young man, I had this very, very strong desire for a romantic relationship. And again, we talk off air about how uh, synchronicity and coincidence seems to manifest so prominently in this area of our lives. I think that's mainly because it's such a central drive for us. It's the strongest energy. That sexual energy is basically what it is. So I think that's one of the reasons why it concentrates in that area. So I was reading books at the time. I was very interested in the esoteric and metaphysical, and for want of a better word, magic. And I'd read this little spell book about how to bring things into your life that you desired. And long story short, so I'd read enough occult literature and metaphysical literature to start to, I think I'll give this a try. And I wanted this thing in my life as a part of my reality, and then it became fixed upon a person, and with concentrated desire, and this is and backed by emotion and concentration, which is the essence of magic, really. Um, I proved to myself for the first time that where if you concentrate, what you focus on is more likely to manifest in your life, whether it's thought or action. And again, this all ties in with your work. And so I was amazed. I didn't think about it at the time. It was only later I realized I was amazed when what I wanted manifested quickly in my life. Now, I will just say that this was a young woman who was a bit older than me at the time. And when you're that age, 3 or 4 years age difference can seem like quite a gulf because it's about a percentage of your life. This young woman was married with 2 children.
Wow.
Okay, yeah. So I'm prepared to admit that because I sensed something about the things she told me about her relationship with her husband, I set that aside. I don't know if that was a terrible thing to do. And um, so she came into my life, and I also learned a harsh lesson there about be careful what you wish for, because it didn't last. You know what I mean? We have a way of like perhaps bringing these things into our lives, and It's like it's a King Midas type thing, really. It's be careful what you wish for. So that was the first part
Just
of,
hold on just a second. I
sure.
think this is an important idea. Be careful what you wish for.
Hmm.
And for the for those who may be wishing, it's an important principle. Be
Hmm.
careful what you wish for. And would you, as you will tell us about this married woman with the two children and it didn't last, but tell us more about what you mean. Be careful what you wish for.
Um, because I went into that situation. And what I described was, that little spell book was just simply a way of, a description of an ancient way of focusing attention and emotion and desire. So that's entirely, the word magic is simply a word for something that we all do anyway. It's through our thoughts and the energy that we put out into the world and what we draw back in. So if people are going out there and thinking, I want this and I want that, uh, you said to me off air something about you didn't know what you wanted. You could explain the context of that. I think it was just in terms of your research going forward. But a lot of people don't know what they want, and it can be very easy to say, I want lots of money, and I want this, and I want a big house and a big car. Is that what you want? Because most people's desires are not their own; they're what they're fed from the culture, if you see what I mean. So it's really knowing what you want is a huge thing. Most people go through their life and never really know what they want, partially because they've never really thought about it. And we're not encouraged to, actually. We're encouraged to, as I say, take the ideas about what's desirable in life from the culture and, corporations and the media and what have you. So it's just if you're going to set about taking, trying to take some kind of control in your life, of your life and steer it and bring into it what you want and set aside what's not working, it's just to have that clarity that there's a process. You don't just dive in at the deep end to get some clarity about who you are and what it is that you truly desire. And I say that's quite a hill to climb. That's not just a matter of flicking through some catalogs and saying that looks good, because there isn't even metaphysical catalogs.
Yeah, you're making a wonderful point to make it clearer to our audience and even to me, how what we're fed to want, we then end up thinking we want. But is that really what we want? And what do we mean by want? Want means basically there's something missing in me. I'm wanting something. So it seems to me that just using the etymology of the word, looking at what's missing in you, what would fulfill you more, at least around that time, would be a way to answer that question.
What might be a better phrase to use? I mean, I used the word want advisedly because that's what is used, but in life is what am I supposed to be doing or why am I here? That, again, we get back to those big existential questions. Um, is there meaning and purpose? Am I fulfilling my purpose? If you ask that question in the culture today, people are saying, what are you talking about? Are you working a job that you're good at? There's more to it than that, if you see what I mean. It's like, so because there's a denial of the possibility even of meaning and purpose, certainly in Western culture. So perhaps that might be a better way of putting it is, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing?
I'm afraid that is still confusing, um, because there's a connection between what's missing in me and the purpose that you describe as what am I supposed to be doing, as if
Yes.
it's coming from the outside. And it's really like synchronicity. It's a meeting of what's missing in you with what the outside might be wanting from you.
Okay. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. It is. And that's the tendency is to look outside ourselves for everything, isn't it? As you just pointed out, not just in the material sense, but perhaps in the spiritual sense as well.
Yeah, at least that's
Um,
the way you phrased it. That's what, yeah, it's like,
yeah, perhaps that's not exactly what I meant, but well, for me anyway, I feel like I'm on a journey of trying to navigate all of that and just try and figure out what is within me and what is coming from without, and try and identify those things as, whether they're congruous or synchronous or not. Um, I feel that at this stage of my life, well, for probably for most of my life, but it's been crystallizing as the years have gone by, that there is something that I feel that I am supposed to be doing, not coming from outside, but it really is something that is coming from within inside. And for me, that's to communicate with other people, whether on whatever level, superficially or on a deeper level, about just exactly the sorts of things that we're talking about, um, because that feels like there's it's part of and in terms of an evolutionary trajectory, that it feels to me stuck at the moment in terms of our species, and we can't really say much more about evolutionary process beyond this planet, really. So that's something that I feel increasingly that I need to be doing, with all of my time, is having conversations like this and trying to help people on whatever level they find themselves at, um, just in terms of like their lives. Because if you look at from the surface of events in the world, just day to day, 5 cents, three-dimensional stuff, that we're just beset by problems and things only appear to be getting worse. I don't think that is the direction of travel. I think that's just like an oscillation in events. But because our timelines are in terms of human lives, and especially since the scientific industrial revolutions, everything's tied into these very, very short cycles, and we're discouraged about thinking about our ancient ancestors and what they did and who they were, and that the only way is up. There's a trajectory of human progress. It's just like that. I don't feel that's the case at all, but I do feel that we're kind of stuck at the minute, and at every level, meeting people where they are, whether it's purely materialistic and they see life as just like, you're born, there's the void of nothingness before you're born, there's a void of nothingness after you die, and you're just here for a short while to have a good time, to try and help people navigate that through to what seems to be increasingly happening, which is people are being, and I think this is an evolutionary pressure, people are being pushed and pushed and pushed by material circumstances into asking, is this all there is? Or what are we going to do?
Yeah, and you're focusing on purpose, and just how we talk about inner and outer is up to each of us. But synchronicity tells us that we are not separate from our environment. We are connected to our environment in ways that materialism and regular science declines to notice, even though the data is there. So we won't have to discuss inner and outer on purpose, but purpose is really important, and finding it, however you register it. Now let's go back to your woman with the two children. Here you did magic, and I'm delighted at the way you describe magic as just putting a lot of energy into a particular possibility, emotional energy as well as thought energy,
Mhm.
into helping that outcome manifest itself. So you did that. You did some magic incantations, or whatever you did.
Not
You,
quite, but yeah.
well, it's fun to do that. It, it's, and there she was, and there she wasn't. So tell us more about what happened there.
Yeah, so that was this is where subjectivity comes into it, um, because it felt to me so strongly that because I'd put so much energy into that, focused energy and desire, and I remember doing this, this process, going through this um, routine on a regular basis. Routine makes it sound mundane. It wasn't. Let's just call it ritual. That's what it really was. And then what I was praying for, because that's what that was as well. Praying is just a way of,
Yeah, yeah,
asking for what you want.
yeah.
And it manifested. Um, I attributed that to my desire and my action. I don't think that was unreasonable. Anyone else could look at the situation and say, "Oh, it's a coincidence." Well, I'm
It
saying,
is.
well,
It is a coincidence.
yeah, yeah, sure, of course it's that as well, but subjectively it was something that I did, and that's not any attributing any special powers. It's nothing like that at all. We're all doing this all the time. It's just that I did it consciously. People are bringing all sorts of things in and out of their lives through their own thoughts and their, the energy they put into things or don't put into things, but they're just not aware of it or only dimly aware of it, or they don't attribute any possibility that they to themselves that they could somehow control this or marshal it, or that it's something that they think it's just something that's happening by accident around them.
Well,
So,
let's say that that's right, and let's say you were conscious of it, as more and more people are becoming conscious. But you have to be careful about what you wish for, and that is careful about what you imagine you want to have happen and what energy you put into that. And with you and this woman, what happened?
um, it's I'm not quite sure. Well, no, of course, I'll tell you what happened, but I'm not quite sure quite why it happened. But at some point, um, I then I moved not very far away from where we both were, but just to another country, but really only like 100 miles away. And a another young woman who looked a bit like woman number one took an interest in me that I wasn't aware of or I was blind to at first. And I had to be told she is interested in you romantically. And maybe I was like naive. I think I probably was relatively. And I was like, really? And um, this was something that was from a mutual acquaintance, a mutual friend at the time said, "Yeah, this is very strong. You should go and talk to her. You should find a way to spend some time with her, or just meet up with her accidentally in the store or something like that." And I thought to myself, well, that sounds really exciting, but hang on a minute. Wait a minute. There's something else going on in my life, even at slightly at a distance at the minute, because I'm in this different country for this reason where I need to be there. And then I did meet this woman number two and thought, yeah, oh, she's amazing, really. She looks like woman number one. I said, maybe that's just my type. And then I finished up what I needed to do in this other country, went back to my home country and thought I'll just pick up things, I'll just pick up where they left off, 6 months ago with this, woman who I, put all this energy into, who I thought, could just be my life partner. Forget her then former husband and her two children who were great, but then I got phone called her up. This is before like modern messaging techniques. Yeah, I'm back, and she said, yeah, okay, but that's it. We're done. And it was at that time in my life, it was the most difficult thing that ever happened to me. It was devastating. It was absolutely devastating. The day after, I would wake up in the morning and just not be able to handle the fact that this had happened. I just didn't want to be alive anymore. I didn't want to die. I just wanted the pain to stop. Uh, but then, so I said, there's nothing here for me anymore. So I went back to the country I'd been in, so it was actually studying, and then ended up having a relationship with this woman number two, as it were, the one who was intensely interested in me, and that who looked like woman number one, and that then was another phase. And then there's several more steps in this process, but it felt like, and this continued to happen. It felt like you put all that energy into that situation that you wanted to manifest, okay, and you got it, but then suddenly you had all this pain and suffering, but then there was this other thing here, and it was like, but this is here to take the place of it. This will be better. And it was almost like reminded me of, it was like a metaphor for life in itself, which was joy and suffering. And it was like, there's pain and pleasure, and it was like there isn't one without the other, and that continued. And
Well, this is a bipolar world that we live
mm,
in, and you're just describing the sine wave of the up and down
mm,
in that experience. I'm caught in lost in the ambiguity of what you're saying,
okay,
because the story, this is a story. This is a coincidence story, and a lot of what you're saying is about it. But we need to do that. But then the whole reason I wanted to talk with you is it kept happening. Something
yes.
kept happening. And you've alluded to that several times now, but what kept happening besides there was number two? What kept happening after number two?
I kept thinking that I'd arrived, and uh, and then I hadn't. Um, and can I can I add something else to that? Can you prompt me to add something else to that? Yeah, I kept thinking this is it, and then it wasn't, and then this is it, but with a chain of
Yeah,
connection.
there's a chain of connections. I mean, just to give you a little idea, I've looked back at my life and seeing a string of 5 or 6 women starting from when I was in high school that all had similar characteristics. There were
Yeah.
like a chain of them. And I got their pictures, or at least the ones that I could, and just put them out to see what the chain was like. And as I kept looking at them, the first one was really the hardest one. And then after that, there was a second one was a painful one, but not as much. And then the fourth one was like, or the fifth one was like really upsetting, but very educational. And the sixth one was one of the best girlfriends I've never had, one of the best girlfriends I never had. I always thought she was my girlfriend, but I was not her boyfriend. But it was so educational. So the whole string of it, of the similar kinds of women, were a process of tuning me into reality about relationships in ways that I had not known when I was in high school.
Okay, so it's exactly again. I realize you're interviewing me today, but what you described, yes, it's a process of education,
Well, we,
induction.
well, we can have a conversation. It doesn't have to be just me interviewing you. But if what I just described is what you are describing, and then we don't necessarily have to go through all the details, but if you were like me in this case, which I'm assuming you were, it was a very psychologically and spiritually perhaps uh, elevating, expanding experience for you to go through these sequential women.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of all the sort of experiences I've had, I've found that interpersonal relationships of all types, family, friends, romantic relationships, but in particular, that's what they are. It's the interpersonal stuff. You're engaging with nature and with all the dimensions of reality, but there's something about our interactions with other human beings, particularly on that intimate level.
Uh,
Um,
I don't want to categorize you too much, but yeah, you're a romantic, Greg, is what it appears to me. And not everybody has that predisposition towards romance, which it sounds like you do.
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I'm definitely not a cynic as far as that's concerned. I think it's that's part of whether you use romance purely in interpersonal terms or whether you use it, in terms of our engagement with nature and just the whole, picture of reality, then yeah, absolutely. That's for me, that's a very important dimension. That's one of the things that I find frustrating about the scientific worldview. I think that the romantics, as it were, as the movement, I think was very important, but perhaps in the tragic romantic, oh woe is me, suicide thing took it too far. So for me, it really is a balance. But
Yeah.
again, I think we live in an age, we have done, for a couple of hundred years, where it's all about uh, interpersonal romantic relationships are boiled down to biological sex and chemicals, you know, and hormones and stuff.
Well, as you
And
get older, I'm assuming that you can't just put it down to sex. that there's something more that's heartfelt, that's loving, that is more than just the sexual part of it, that it's love with life, love with nature. And here's where we get to synchronicity and humanity, because romance with humanity, caring about what humanity is doing with itself, to love humanity in a way to try to be helpful to whatever you mean by humanity, becomes a place where I ask you to talk about synchronicity and its impact potentially on the future of humanity.
Okay, so yeah, I think that one of the popular tropes at the minute um, in the culture, and has been for a while, and it's tied in with environmentalism, what have you. Nothing wrong with caring for the environment, but it's this idea that humans are a cancer on the planet, and that somehow we're separate from nature. And of course, we've seen ourselves that way um, for quite a long time, again, encouraged by the scientific reductionist materialist worldview. Um, but for me, it's just so incredibly damaging. Um, where the interconnectedness was a word that you used, and for me, that's absolutely fundamental, and it's one of the lessons of coincidence and synchronicity is that we're all interconnected, interdependent, and there's no getting away from that. And I think that going forward, that's a huge lesson. I read, I think it was in one of Bruce Lipton's books many years ago, when he was talking about an analogy for the human body and wider humanity in terms of global conflict, and whether that's over resources or territory or ideology, and mapping that down into the human body. And he said something along the lines of, you don't see your lungs for resources, you know, and that's kind of the absurdity of the situation that we find ourselves in, which is a, a denial of or misunderstanding about um, our intimate interconnectedness, leads us to treat each other as individuals, but also in these atomized groupings, as like nations and corporations or whatever, as separate and competing. And there is competitiveness in nature. Naturally, there is. But we're at a state now where things are becoming more and more atomized. I think in terms of nationalities, you see what the US government and the Russian government are doing at the minute in terms of territorial grabs. That those are the actions. Those are defensive actions through a sense of lack, that we have to grab things for ourselves before other people get them, so that we can survive. Whereas the survival of the whole is again intimately linked.
Well, let's see if we can perhaps move away from the diagnosis, because
Mhm.
we both know there's a lot of bad stuff going on, and there's no end of people talking about the doom that is going on around us. There's not enough people talking about the potential future for humanity. And I'm trying to be able to find people who are willing to not just talk about the gloom, not just talk about the doom, but be able to imagine how we might get out of this in a way that is constructive and useful for the human beings, which include, as you're alluding to, we are destroying our environment, we're destroying our habitat. We've got to be able to like not do that, because that will feed back on us and damage us as human beings. What can we do? How does synchronicity help guide us into a better future, Greg?
Synchronicity and coincidence, as I say, I tie them in my work, my thesis, with paranormal phenomena and all sorts of non-material manifestations. They're indicating something to us, I believe, about the nature of reality, and that basically that there's non-material dimensions as well as material. In fact, I think fundamentally the universe is mental. So what we can do is start to think about, and this is increasingly happening, which is, despite all the doom and gloom, it is good. Start to think about more deeply, reassess what's actually going on here, and when we do that, you begin to see a lot of the limitations of the scientific materialistic paradigm begin to fall away. And that opens up not just a theoretical landscape for me, but it's actually very, very practical, because the ideas about consciousness being fundamental, they're not just interesting things that you might read in a book, then put the book down and go back to what you were doing before. Um, the work, for example, people that I've interviewed, Rupert Sheldrake, Ian McGilchrist, Bernardo Kastrup, these are scientists and thinkers at the cutting edge of research about the nature of reality and consciousness, and they constantly are relating what they have been working on for decades into practically how we live, and it should steer how we live, and and it can do. We just have to live with that in mind, literally, if you see what I mean. So if you go out into the world and every interaction you have is you imagine, like, picture the Matrix movie, where everything is like, not only is it fundamentally interconnected, but you can see it. Imagine how differently you might think about that road rage person on the other lane if that was basically you and you're them. So for me, that's what it's about: is reassessing, approaching the fundamental nature of what this is, and then understanding that that isn't just abstract, that it tells us something, actually a paradigm that our ancestors held for the longest time. The one that we hold, the scientific materialist paradigm, is only relatively recent, which tells us that, you know, matter is all that matters, and that what you see out the window or on your TV is all that there is.
Greg, you're a musician. You've written about music. And what I'm asking you is not to talk about the music, but to actually talk with the music. You mentioned Ian McGilchrist, you mentioned a couple others, Bernardo Castro, and the most concrete tune or bit that I heard from you is the person who you get mad at or is mad at you on the road, and to be able to say that person is you and you are that person. That is the kind of music I thought I would hear from you, and I'm continuing to ask for how does those ideas, McGilchrist, Kastrup, and your thinking actually manifest, let me use that word, in this reality?
Um, we manifest it. I'm not sure how to approach this because I've not been interrogated quite like this before, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. Um,
Well, I understand what you just said, and I apologize for the sense of being interrogated.
no, that's my
Uh,
word, not your action. Don't worry. Sorry.
well, if that's what you experienced, I apologize for it, but that is your word. And what I am deeply interested in somebody who says, I explore the future, the nature of reality and the future of humanity. I want to see what this guy's talking about. And the future is what I am talking about. Kastrup and others like him are talk about consciousness. Is it this or is that? Is it? There's lots of different ways of dividing up the term, which for me is not well defined. I've interviewed several people on this show, and there are different views, different ideas about what consciousness is, and it's used in a variety of different ways. And I'm trying to ask, well, maybe we can't talk about this now, but how does your view of consciousness actually affect the way you think, you believe, you want to see humanity behaving itself into the future?
Well, it is it's an undoing, or a moving beyond more than undoing. I just think of the materialist paradigm, so that we live surrounded by the trappings of the scientific worldview, which is like material goods, and this is what we lived to gain, and this is what we should be pursuing. And there's no doubt that science and the industry and everything has made life, day-to-day life, in terms of, for example, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, has made life more comfortable for most people on the planet to some extent. But we've taken that too far, and it's blinded us to anything beyond that in terms of like a spiritual dimension, however you want to use that word. A lot of people don't like it because it's associated with religion. So I'm not trying to idealize the ancient past, because I think we cannot do that. But there's simply a way of being um, on this planet, which I think is just a very temporary little blip, by the way, that would be much more interesting and harmonious if we were able to achieve more of a balance, which I think we can do through learning about, rediscovering the dual nature of reality, and just moving away from this pursuit of, the purely material. I think that, for example, what you do with a lot of your time, it appears to me, you've had a long career, um, but what you're doing with a lot of your time now is having conversations and contemplating and thinking about things, and communicating with other people and trying to disseminate ideas. And that's how I'd like to spend my day, actually talking with you. And I'd like to do this again tomorrow. Maybe we can do it next week, and you can tell me about the people that you've spoken with, and begin to explore again what this perhaps is for. And is, if there is a purpose for our existence here, what that might that be going forward, because it's clearly not just along the lines of what we're doing now. So for me, it would just be like, just take a step back from the materialistic culture that's clearly not got a future in terms of energy and environment, for example. We can't carry on like this. So we to try and step back from that, and um, just live a little, rather than just just be like dying on our feet, as it were. Um, Ask people, if you talk to people, how would you like to spend your day? You talk to people who are in various jobs or whatever. 9 times out of 10, it's not what they're actually doing. And say, okay, well, why is that? It's talking about, well, why are we doing that? It's fine. Um, you're serving me coffee. Coffee is good. I'd like to have a coffee. But is that all you want to do with all of your time? So perhaps I'm not articulating this very well, but I just think that we funnel ourselves into um, um, just a trap, and it's a bottomless pit. And I know that's diagnosing the problem again, but for me, this is what the future would involve: stepping back from where we are now as a bit of a kind of a time out. And I'm not exactly sure what the near to medium term future might look like, but I do know that it has to be different from what it is now. And for me, that's talking to people about it. And I don't know how what your personal circumstances, your material circumstances are, um, but I'm trying to, as a way of exploring these possibilities, to live with less but do more, if you see what I mean. And talking to, and there's a lot of other people who are trying to do that as well, partly through necessity. But I'd like to be encouraging people who are perhaps being forced into a corner of material circumstances, to develop strategies and techniques for, like, okay, well, how can we um, get to the point where that's actually the dominant trend, if you see what I mean? So that more people are able to say, thank God I don't have to do that anymore, because the systems that we were working to support have been, downstepped to a point where that's possible. And it sounds like if it sounds like a future utopia, it's not. If it sounds like a throwback to some kind of golden age, it's not. But so again, actually, I don't know. I've kind of gone off on one there, but if you can pick out anything there that you'd like me to elaborate on,
Yeah,
please
I
do.
look at people when I interview them, as I'm looking at you, and say, well, how are they modeling a potential future for humanity? Not just what they say, but what are
Mm,
they doing? And what I keep hearing from you is that you love engaging in conversation with people. This is your purpose in life. This is what somehow you've managed to get to so that you are able to find people to have dialogues with, and
Yes.
you are very flexible in how you dialogue with someone. If they're a materialist, you will do that. You'll go to that person's state of mind. If there's somebody who's more like Bernardo Kastrup or Ian McGilchrist, you will go where they are. And any place in between, you will try to have a dialogue with such people as what you are modeling for the future of humanity.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's exactly it. So, um, and that's been a process, as I say, only recently, well, I say recently, I mean like 10, 15 years ago, that's what I've kind of been doing all my life. And that's what, if I if I had my life over again, then I would have started on that project, tried to make that within the materialist paradigm, the world of work and all that. I would have tried to make that part of my life straight away. Whereas what I did was drifted. I don't mean that in an entirely negative way, but went from one thing to another, hence all those decades in the music business, going from like, oh, this is good, this is fun, this is interesting, but all the while thinking, is there something else I'm supposed to be doing? I remember when I decided to start going online with all of this was about 2010. And my partner at the time uh, started to, she'd been a lawyer, but she started to work from home after giving up the legal job and doing crafts, which again for me was a step in a very positive direction in terms of like her life or anyone's life. And she accredited that to me indirectly at least. And I had an office study upstairs and I was reading all these books and going through all this material. And I kept coming downstairs to tell her about exciting ideas. And I remember one day, sort of, do you know what? I've just been reading this book. I think there might be something in here about the purpose of life. And she said to me, well, do you know what? This is all really interesting. And I like hearing from you, but have you thought about talking to anyone else about it? Because I'm the only one hearing this, and it's just you're telling me, and it's fascinating, but I think that lots of people would like to hear about this. Millions of people might benefit from hearing about this. So that's where that started.
Oh,
And
well, that's a lovely story where you you were encouraged to do what you want to do, which is talk with people. And that's what she helped you come up with. Your ideas might be useful to others, and that's what you've been able to find. So, congratulations on finding what sounds to me like your purpose. I mean, to look back and say it should have been different, we can't do that.
no, no.
This is what she helped you do. And as you do this dialoguing, I think there is a message or there are messages that you have that you indirectly might try to get across to the person you're talking with as you're listening to them. I just have the feeling that you have certain ideas that you will then try to fashion for the mind of the person you're talking with to help them in their evolutionary development.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Um, yeah, I think isn't that what we all do? We have well, actually, maybe that's I can turn that around. Maybe that's what we don't all do at all. Maybe that's part of the problem in um, like human communication is that we don't never mind meeting people where they are, we don't even understand where they are. Um, and we don't fashion not responses or thoughts in a way that might be constructive, as part of that dialogue. Um,
I can't emphasize how strongly I believe what you just said. And I'll put it in somewhat different terms, but it's the same idea. When I'm talking with someone, as I have been with you, trying to understand how your mind works, because that's what I have been doing here, is trying to see what I can find in the way you are thinking that might be compatible with the way I think about things so that we both can help each other evolve a particular interest we each have. And what I saw is that you, as with your lawyer now, craftsperson, and encouraging her to do that, that you have an open heart, a romantic, I'll call it, love for others, that you want to help them become who they are. That is to find their purpose in life, to find a way they can be who they might best be or might better be. That is deep in part of your intention of your multiple dialogues. That's my impression.
Yes, thank you for that. I'll take that away and keep that because that's a beautiful beautiful thing to say. I lost a friend to good
And you're
friends.
welcome. You're welcome. And I want to hear about your friend, but I want to hear what you just heard me say. Because, when these dialogues go on, sometimes I don't know what the other person heard. So we'll get to your friend who died, but I want to hear what you heard from me that you appreciated.
That I felt and was able to find a way to express a desire or even a need to help or encourage other people to think about who they are, find out who they are, be who they are, or if they're not who if they are not who they think they are, then to change that and to evolve, because ultimately we're all doing it. We
We're all not doing it. That's part of the
Well, we're all
trouble.
not doing it. Yeah, well, whatever it is that we're doing it, we're or not doing. We're all doing it together or not
And
doing it together.
and doing it together is what Greg Moffitt is trying to be part of from what we're talking about. That through your dialogue, your passion for dialogue, that's what I will call it, that you want to hear the other person's mind and heart and be able to find a way that you can facilitate their finding their purpose, their evolution, whatever is best for them. That's the love you carry with you when you come into dialogues, is what I hear.
Yeah, and I do have conversations that are based more or less entirely in uh, the materialist fundamentalist paradigm. And I had conversations with um, people who are broadly in support of Donald Trump. Um, the fact that I say that as some kind of this sounds vaguely controversial says something in itself. I've had conversations with people who I don't know how many of your viewers will be familiar with British politics or European politics and a process from a few years ago called Brexit, where the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. That was a very controversial process. Those in favor of that departure were characterized a little bit like Trump supporters. I mention this because the fact that I had conversations with these people where I don't really consider I have a dog in the fight in those scenarios was kind of almost like anathema. How can you possibly talk to these people? So, well, if you don't talk to them, you don't. We're trying to find out what is it they actually think. Why do they think it, and who are they? You see what I mean? So
Yeah,
that's just
yeah, that's wonderful. That is a wonderful role that you, Greg Moffat, are playing in the world, where you try to see from a neutral perspective, a relatively non-judgmental perspective, just how is that person thinking? I want to know how that person's mind is operating, how that person's heart is operating. And maybe that's all sometimes, but even by just hearing them, by having that person feel heard by you, that's a contribution to that person's life as well.
yeah, because one of the reasons that what happened, and this is all over the world happening in the modern era all the time, but one of the reasons that Trump manifested, whatever you think about him and his administration, it's one of the reasons that Brexit happened is because the people, certain portions of the population, roughly, between 49 and 51%, weren't feeling heard. That's why this erupted like a pimple on the skin. It was just it was like illness does. It was an outer manifestation of some kind of inner um, you know, ailment.
They weren't feeling heard.
Correct.
And I don't know. I mean, I would have liked to, and I'll look back the way you do sometimes to look back at what might have been different with your conversation with me. Is that this? I kind of wish I would have picked up on this earlier because this is a wonderful lesson that you are demonstrating for others because I think you are demonstrating one of the essentials for the future of humanity is that each of us try to be able to hear the mind and the heart of the other person in as non-judgmental a way as possible, because feeling heard, as you just so clearly stated, is so essential for other people. They're not being heard. They're being talked at. They're being ignored. And you are saying, I will listen to you. I will try to understand where you're coming from. And that's a wonderful contribution to the world, Greg.
Yeah, and it applies right from, international, global level, right down to, if you want, interpersonal and relationships, like two people together not hearing each other, or they stopped hearing each other.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Well, we're coming to the close of our conversation today. And what else would you like to tell our audience?
Um, well, simply that, the headline topic, or certainly the what you spoke with me about on my show, talking about synchronicity, the nature of, and serendipity and coincidence. I think that from a non-material level, how they're functioning really is they're telling us something about the true nature of reality. I put that in air quotes, but they're telling us that there's something else going on here than it appears to be, than
Yeah.
that modern science is telling us. And that's why I tied it in various things that I've done with the UFO and UAP and paranormal and all of these things, that they all, for me, they're all part of the same tapestry. And that we're being steered and guided. We're being shown things. These are indicators saying they're flags, red flags. Hey, look over here.
And you're looking.
I am, yeah, I always have done, because I think the more you look, the more you see, um, in these terms, in terms of these phenomena.
Well, I applaud your curiosity, your openness, and particularly your willingness and interest in knowing the mind and heart of the people that you have dialogues with.
Well, thank you so much, Bernard. And I hope that as round the houses, I don't know if you have that expression in the States, as I may have went with this, that you and your viewers have been able to glean something of some value.
Thank you very much for being with me today, Greg.
Thank you.